The killings of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, of Ahmaud Arbery are singular in their pain, are singular in their particular details, in the anguish and the horror. But this is a terror that is familiar. It is a fear that is baked now, cemented into our culture. For so many Americans, especially Black Americans, this has not just been a tough week, a tough few weeks. It's not just been emotional time because of what we're seeing, the protests all around the country. This has been a tough life. This is the story of day after day after day that punctuates our consciousness only when someone captures on videotape what is a regular part of the fabric of our country. We have a long and wretched and disturbing history in this country of Black people being murdered by law enforcement. Our systems of accountability, our systems of transparency, our ability to end this has proved impotent and feeble. These killings for so many Black Americans today are searing reminders that Black people in this country, as I've heard from dozens of people in my life, as we hear from people on our media, that this could have been me. That this even would have been me in the same circumstances. To hear people at all stations of life, African Americans, saying, I'm alive, but questioning for how long, slipping into the savage reality of despair for your life and your safety. To be Black in America is to know that a misunderstanding, that an implicit racial bias, that a interaction that should be everyday and routine can become a moment where your life is turned upside down, where your body becomes broken, or when you are killed. It is a common experience, but this has been a stretch where, from bird watching in a park to jogging in your neighborhood, to going to a corner store, the jarring reminder, reinforced by personal experiences, that it could be you. I was born to two civil rights activist parents, and I was a big kid. I was over 6 feet by the time I was in 7th or 8th grade, and it was a time in my life that is a coming of age for so many people and cultures across our nation, but something began happening to me in that period. It was marked by the fear of my elders. Family members who, with jarring personal stories for a preteen or a teen, would tell me what it meant to be Black, to be male in America. They were instilling fear in me as a survival mechanism. They were trying to make me aware of my surroundings. I have difficult memories of trips to the malls with elder Black men in my family and being lectured about what I couldn't do, what I shouldn't do, and what the consequences could be. I remember that talk with my parents where I tried to joke about it, but they got chillingly angry with me about what it meant to have a driver's license in America and what could happen to me. And they told me stories of friends, of family members, of others, and their experiences with the police. I spent from those years of 12 and 13 in an America in the 70s and 80s where the words of my parents and elders, backed up with tragic and terrible stories of their experiences in generations before, were reinforced by my own experiences, being followed by mall security guards, being accused or stopped, being looked at with suspicion, and experience after experience after experience with police. I remember as a college student, and it all came to a head where I wrote a column in Stanford's newspaper, "Why Have I Lost Control?" I remember that night writing that column like it was yesterday. I was so overcome with emotion and rage, and I would like to submit for the record that column and read right now pieces of what I wrote that night, that when I look at young men on the streets of America today and I see their anger and I see their rage, it brings me back not to that moment, but to the own feelings that have churned within me for years. I read from the column. Why have I lost control? How can I write when I have lost control of my emotions? Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not shocked. Why not? Turn off your engine, put your keys, driver's license, registration, and insurance on the hood now. Put your hands on the steering wheel and don't even think of moving. 5 police cars, 6 officers surrounded me, guns ready. 30 minutes I sat praying and shaking, only interrupted by their command. I said, "Don't move." Finally, everything checks out, you can go. Sheepishly I asked why. "Oh, you fit the description of a car thief." Not guilty, not shocked. Why not? In the jewelry store, they lock the case when I walk in. In the shoe store, they help the white man who walks in after me. In the shopping mall, they follow me. In the Stanford shopping mall. Last month, I turned and faced their surreptitious security. Catch any thieves today? Not guilty, not shocked. Why not? I'm a black man. I'm 6 foot 3 inches tall and 230 pounds, just like Rodney King. Do I scare you? Am I a threat? Does your fear justify your actions? 12 people, a jury, believed it did. Black male, guilty until proven innocent. Reactions to my kind are justified. Scrutiny is justified. Surveillance is justified. Search is justified. 56 blows justified. Justice, dear God. I graduated from Stanford last June. I was elated. I was one of 4 presidents of my class. I was proud. In the fall, I received a Rhodes Scholarship. I approached arrogance. But late one night, as I walked the streets of Palo Alto, as a police car slowed down while passing me, as his intense steely glare met me, I realized that to him and to so many others, I am and may always be, and I substitute now, I am and may always be the N-word, guilty until proven innocent. I'm struggling to be articulate, loquacious, positive, constructive, but for the first time in so long, I have lost control of my emotions. Rage, frustration, bitterness, animosity, exasperation, sadness, emotions once suppressed, emotions once channeled, now are let loose. Why? Not guilty, not shocked. Poverty, alienation, estrangement, especially continuously aggravated by racism, overt and institutional. Can you leave your neighborhood without being stopped? Can you get a loan from your bank? Can you be trusted at your store? Can you get an ambulance dispatched to your neighborhood? Can you get the police to come to your house? Can you get an education at your school? Can you get a job? Can you stay alive past 25? Can you get respect? Can you be heard? No. Not until someone catches on video one small glimpse of your everyday reality, and even then, can you get justice? Why have I lost control of my emotions? Why do my hands shake as I write? Tonight, I have no answers. Dear God, help us to help ourselves before we become our own undoing. That was 3 decades ago. That was me as a early 20-something, writing about another one of those names that's become household. We remember it decades later. And I wish I could stand here and tell you that much has changed for the experience of that young black man. I wish I could tell you that that was the end of names becoming household words, but it has not. This cycle of violence in our country, these spasms that jerk us from our comfort and pull us into the world that is faced by so many African Americans. And then we go back. So many of us go back to what is now normal in America, what has been normal in America. This cycle, I hear people now talking about the violence, the rioters. I condemn it in the same way that the other 99 members are. It is awful, it is despicable, it is contrary to the aims of this nation and the movements of our past. But to condemn the violence of those out there doing such awful, destructive, condemnation-worthy actions, but to only condemn them and not to condemn the fullness of that cycle of violence. Because there is violence going on even when we don't see it in the streets. Peace even is not just the absence of violence, it's the presence of justice. This unjust cycle in our country that we seem to be stuck in, that makes the names of children like Tamir Rice household names. It is connected with the violence that is pervasive in our nation, that demands all of us to speak out against with the same fervor and enthusiasm and energy that people are condemning the violence we're seeing in America today. To fail to do that leaves us in a state of imbalance. To fail to condemn the totality of violence in our country leaves us far from the beloved community we need to somehow find a way out of that cycle. There is violence in our nation, seen in our environment, that we still are a nation where a person's race is the single biggest factor of whether they live near a toxic site or not. Ask a mother of a child who drank lead water for months and months and has had their brain permanently damaged if that was not violence. It's violence to have access to quality care, to not have access to quality care. Ask the woman who's lost her child because of lack of prenatal care. Ask the black woman in America who today is 4 times more likely to die herself in childbirth. If this isn't a violence in our society that needs condemnation, it's violence we see from our healthcare system to our criminal justice system to environmental injustice to the denial, as one author says, of equality in the savage inequalities within our education systems. It's why so many black Americans scream out, "Do you see me? I do not have your equal justice under law. Do you see me? I do not have justice for all. Do you see me? I matter. I matter. Black lives matter. Black bodies matter. America, I love you. Do you see me? Do you know my experiences? Do you see the failings of our ideals?" The murder of a black man by multiple cops who knew they were being filmed in broad daylight is not the extent of the problem of racism in America. It is a final and deadly manifestation of that racism. Of a nation where everything about us is interwoven, it is interconnected, we are in relationship with each other. This ideal that we are one nation it is not a quaint ideal. It is an inescapable fact of American society. The pain and the hurt of our brothers or sisters is our pain. I can show you that economically. I can show you that by every ideology that's expressed here on the floor of the Senate. This cycle of violence has to stop. The cycle of wretchedness and hurt. Our ancestors scream out at us now. Millions of Americans scream out right now. And I know we have an obligation in this body to do something. I've heard words from people on both sides of the aisle speaking towards the injustice of racism that exists in our country. I've heard words. But for generations, what they sought from this body, greater men and women than any of us, what they sought on the streets, what they sought in front of the White House, from Alice Paul, the first person to protest out there, was legislative changes. That's what they sought. The March on Washington. Disability activists throwing themselves out in front of buses, they fought for tangible legislation. Martin Luther King said, while it may be true that morality cannot be legislated, behavior can be regulated. It may be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me. It's on us. The cries for justice in the street, it's on us. The pain being made manifest for all America to see, it's on us. Those who have been comfortable for too long, who are now pulled from their seats as they stare at a television that shows them a window into a nation that is not at rest. It's on us in this body to do something, to change the law. We can do that. In the coming days, Senator Kamala Harris and I have partnered together on a comprehensive police reform proposal that takes into account the incredible work of Congressional Black Caucus members, many of them who've been in this congressional body much longer than I have. They've been working on these issues much longer than I have. It takes the work of so many people in both of the bodies that make up our Congress and pulls them together. There are so many injustices, but this comprehensive package is about police accountability. It's an answer to the pain and to the hurt and the agony. It speaks to the young children whose parents right now are teaching them fear as an art of survival, teaching them not to be a threat to anyone who could kill you, to try to shrink from the fullness of your body so that they don't take your body, they don't harm your body, they don't kill your body. It creates accountability and transparency and practices that can repair police-community relations, that can give faith back to those who have lost it, that can rescue people who are slipping into a deeper despair about this nation, and perhaps cobble together some semblance of hope. This is a moment in American history where we must recognize the hurt and the pain and do something about it, where this body that has so nobly acted, past years to pass legislation. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and the spasms of 1968. The fair housing laws were passed. I said, I come to you today torn up inside. As so many Americans, the soil of our souls have been plowed up in pain, hoping for seeds of possibility, hoping that somehow born out of agony and despair can sprout a new harvest for America. But I confess to you, as a man who believes in this country and believes in the ideals of hope and love and faith and charity and kindness, I want to confess to you something, that right now, hope is essential, but it's not enough. I confess to you right now, words of kindness and grace are essential to America, but they're not enough right now. I confess to you even something that's hard to admit, that the spirit of courage and grit being shown by people on the streets, not in the comfortable hallways of the Senate, who in one of the most noble traditions of our nation are protesting, are petitioning their government, or peacefully gathering, I want to tell you right now that that is not enough. It is essential, but it is not enough. These things are necessary, but not sufficient. And so how? How do we go forward? And in Washington, the people talk about being so savagely broken. How? At a time that I worry about King's ideal of a beloved community, how? How do we create that out of this moment? I do not know. But I want to tell you this. When I find myself disturbed and sad, when I find my heart that on most days has an invincible hope for our nation, I turn to our history. But I don't need to turn too far. I know there are heroes whose names are hailed from generations past. I don't know how Harriet Tubman, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, I don't know how they mustered their strength and courage. They were marvelous magicians that could turn the most wretched of times into progress. And so at a time that our nation, strike at a time that I need hope, I tell you, I turn to the spiritual alchemists of our day. I've met them. I've been to a church in South Carolina where white supremacists stormed in and murdered 9 blessed souls. I watched on a TV screen about this spiritual alchemist who somehow turned the most unimaginable grief into forgiveness and a lesson for our nation. I visited a church just a few months ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was the last structure that was left standing out of one of the greatest acts of domestic terrorism we've ever seen, the torching, the bombing of Black Wall Street. And I met a pastor there, Pastor Turner, a great spiritual alchemist who somehow turned the only remaining structure After horrific violence, he somehow turned it into a symbol of struggle. I've talked to the mothers of the movement. These are these great black women whose sons were murdered, names we now know. I learned from them this unbelievable demonstration of spiritual alchemy, that somehow they turned their tragedies into a grit and a guts and a determination to never stop fighting. As long as they have breath in their body and blood in their veins, they will fight for this nation, even when it so savagely let them down. I get strength from those in our nation today who demonstrate an alchemy greater than any power I can possess. That somehow, in our darkest of times, we still are a nation that can find a way to ignite the world. In a nation where so many people have been so thoroughly failed, that they can still manifest the ability to fight for the ideals that have been denied for them. They are the ones right now whose spirit we all must try to summon. We'll come up short, but we must try to summon it. It is the only way forward. That somehow this nation that shares one spirit can find a way to put enough indivisible into this one nation under God, that somehow this great country can find a way in this time of our generation's great crisis, that we, like those before us, those magicians, those alchemists of love and spirit and sweat and struggle, that out of this crisis time, we can make this nation be truly one of liberty and justice for all.